everyone, this is Dawn. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you how to make 3 easy cards using Elegant Snowflakes. I'm also going to be using Flourished Joy and some Serenity papers, and then later on you'll see I'll be using some oxide inks and some white daisy cardstock. So let's get started. I'm going to use this upper section of the Serenity paper that's lighter in color in the bluebells, and I'm cutting that at 4 by 5 1/4 inches. Okay, so I'm going to start stamping, and I'm using the soft side of my Versamat for some cushion below my stamp, and I'm just figuring out where I want that joy sentiment to be on that panel so I can figure out where to place my snowflakes. So I'm stamping in sapphire, and I've just got a variety of the different snowflake stamps from this set mounted on blocks, and I'm just going to scatter a bunch of them around on this panel in sapphire. So I'm just kind of figuring out the placement, and I'm stamping off the edge, and that's why I have some scratch paper behind my patterned paper panel, so that I can stamp over the edge and that scratch paper will catch the ink. So I like to start out with the largest images first, and then I work the smaller ones in around them. So just have some random snowflakes on this panel. Trying to clean up my stamps as I go with my stamp chamois. Okay, so now I'm going to hit it with my heat tool just to make sure that ink is dry, because I'm not patient and I want it to dry fast. And then I'm going to dust it with my anti-static powder pouch. And I've got my Versamark ink and white detail embossing powder. So I'm going to ink up my Joy sentiment with Versamark, and this is a sticky ink that embossing powder will stick to. I've got that stamped down, and then I'm going to sprinkle my white detail embossing powder on it and then just tap it off. Okay, so I'm going to heat this up really quick. I've got the video sped up super fast to melt that, and I realized that I had some stray bits of embossing powder, so I'm just brushing them off with a dry paintbrush. Okay, so now I have my sentiment on my panel, and then I can work my other stamps around that. So now I'm going to ink up my snowflake images in the Versamark ink and stamp over my previous stamped images. So it's kind of going to be a, I don't know, almost a 3D effect where some snowflakes are on top of other snowflakes. And it's hard to see it in the video, but you'll see it once I sprinkle the embossing powder on it, on these images. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm just random stamping these images all around this panel, and then I'm going to sprinkle my white detail embossing powder on it and then just tap it off. Now you will notice that quite a bit of stray bits of powder still get stuck, so you'll want to knock them off. You'll see it in the next cards. They didn't stick so bad this time on this panel, but once I start using oxide inks, you'll see. So then I'm just heating everything up and melting that embossing powder. All right, so now we're ready to build our card. I'm going to keep this really simple. I think these panels turned out really pretty. So I'm going to mount this piece on sapphire cardstock. It's going to be a landscape top fold A2 size card. So I'm going to cut my sapphire at 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. and just keep everything really simple. These cards are great if you are doing cards for the Cards for Soldiers program or Cards for Kindness, as you can mass produce them and they're not bulky, so they'll go through the mail really easy. But they're super pretty and simple, I think. All right, so that's the first card. Have that border of sapphire around the stamped piece. You can also stamp the joy sentiment in gold embossing powder. I might do one of those later on. Okay, now let's make another card. I'm going to cut my white daisy cardstock down to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. And I'm going to stamp. First, I'm going to stamp my sentiment, and I'm using this Nuvo embossing powder. This color is called Crystal Snowflake or Snowflake Crystal. It's kind of a light blue and glittery color. So I'm going to stamp my sentiment, and this is from the stamp set Elegant Snowflakes, and it says Warm Winter Wishes. So I'm doing it's the same process, just stamping in Versamark, sprinkle the embossing powder, and then melt everything with your heat tool. Okay, so I'm going to get everything out of the way, and I'll funnel that excess embossing powder back into the jar. And I wasn't sure which order I was going to do this in. I thought I would use my stamps first, but then I decided to go ahead and do some oxide ink blending before I stamp. So this color is called Blueprint Sketch. And I'm just taking my blending tool and just putting a layer of color down on this panel everywhere. Just get that inked up. And then I'm going to go in with Salty Ocean and just do some other areas on this panel in Salty Ocean, and then I'll go back with my blending tool from Blueprint Sketch and kind of blend everything together. It's just a really simple blend. I'm using a microfiber cleaning cloth to buff out that sentiment to get the ink off of it. Okay, now we're ready to start stamping, and I'm using sapphire ink. And it's the same process. I'm going to random stamp a bunch of these snowflakes all around my card panel in sapphire. And then I realized I forgot to clean off my blocks, so I'm doing that really quick. And then we'll get these guys all stamped down. And there's not really a pattern I'm following. I'm just kind of stamping a bunch of these images around, trying to keep it random. And just fill up this panel. Okay, so I'm going to hit it with the heat tool to dry that ink again. And it's important to really make sure that ink is dry before you start using your embossing powder. And then I used my anti-static powder pouch on the whole panel. And now I'm going to stamp my snowflakes on top of the other snowflakes with Versamark ink. And do the same process with embossing in white detail embossing powder, these snowflakes. So I'm stamping a bunch of these images all around the panel. And you kind of have to, because it's pretty clear and a little bit tricky to see, so you kind of have to remember what you have put where. So then I'm just going to sprinkle my embossing powder on top. And this one, a lot of it has stuck to the previous stamped images. So I'm just going to make sure that all of my stamped images are, the Versamark stamped images have powder on them. And then I'm going to go around and knock off all of that extra stray bits using a dry paintbrush. And when you see me pull that panel back, I'm pulling it back and blowing on it to get rid of those extra bits. It's important to make sure you have everything gone before you start using your heat tool. And then I'm going to heat everything up and melt that embossing powder. All right, so let's build our card. Again, this one's going to be quick and easy. I think of the 3 cards, this one's my favorite. I just love that bright blue. So I'm just going to glue it to my card base with Tombow tape. And that's going to be my finished card. So pretty. All right. It's super easy. You make a bunch of these. Okay, let's do another one. I'm going to cut this again, same as the other card, at 4 inches by 5.5. And I'm looking at the corners of my cardstock piece, and they kind of got munched, and so I'm trimming off those edges so that they're smooth edges. So this one, I'm going to do the same type of card using wilted violet and picked raspberry. So this time I'm going to stamp the same sentiment, warm winter wishes, down on my card panel. And I'm going to emboss this in white detail embossing powder. And in retrospect, I probably should have just waited and done all of my white embossing powder images all at the same time. But this worked. It's hard to see on camera, but I've got that sentiment down. And now I'm going to take my wilted violet ink, and I'm just going to ink up this whole panel. Waiting to do that white detail embossing powder last would keep the white more crisp and clean, rather than buffing it out after inking over it. So let's keep that in mind, but both ways work. Okay, so I have a layer of color down of that wilted violet, and then I'm going to go in and put some of the picked raspberry in different areas, and then I'll go back with my other blending tool and kind of blend everything together. This is a really quick and easy blend. I'm not taking tons of time. So now I'm buffing out that image and getting the ink off of it. Okay, so now I'm going to take grape ink. I'm going to dry off my panel first with my heat tool. And then I'm going to stamp my snowflake images in grape, the same way that I did the other 2 cards. So I'm just going to random stamp. I love this grape color. It's a true purple. I'll have to make more cards using this color with the cardstock. So random stamping all of these snowflakes around. They're more, the images they're more subtle on this purple panel, but I still think they turned out really pretty. So again, I'm gonna hit it with the heat tool and make sure all that ink is dry before I start using my Versamark. I'll tap it with my anti-static powder pouch, and I'm going to stamp random stamp all of my snowflake images in Versamark ink. Same process. And like I said before, there's no real pattern that I'm using. I'm just kind of trying to keep everything random. Okay, and then I'll sprinkle it with the white daisy, the white detail embossing powder. And then I'll have to knock off the extra random bits of powder with a dry paintbrush. So all of the supplies that I'm using are available in my online store, and I will make a list with links in the description below. A couple of the oxide colors are not colors that close to my heart carries. The Blueprint Sketch, Wilted Violet, and Salty Ocean, but they do carry Picked Raspberry. You can get Tim Holtz products in most of the big box craft stores. And we do have some other colors, several colors available, so you can do this project with any colors you like. I'm going to heat that up, and then there were some random areas that I felt like needed more powder on them, so. Okay, now we're ready to create the card, and this one's simple. Just going to glue it with Tombow tape runner to the front of my card base and leave a white border around it. Clean and simple. And then I'm just buffing out my snowflakes. Okay, and there's my finished card. I think they turned out pretty. I appreciate you watching my video today. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button, and thanks for watching.